What if I told you that the wood grain on your foam modeling projects does not have to look like this, but in fact it can look like this, and it only takes a little tiny bit more effort? If that's something that interests you at all, I suggest you stick around because that's what we're going to be talking about today on the Storycraft Society. Moi Gaiki and welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin, this is the Storycraft Society, and a few weeks ago I talked about how to carve stone block more effectively. I'll show the thumbnail right now, and that video got me thinking about how I can do that with my foam carvings on other textures. And this week specifically, I'd like to talk about carving wood grain. Historically speaking, carving wood grain is as simple as taking a pencil and just scoring the wood grain into your foam, and it ends up looking like this. And I think that this is something that we are all familiar with, and we all have builds from the early time in our crafting where this is what our wood grain looked like. In my opinion, I think we can all do better, but the good news in that is that not only can we all do better, but it's not that much harder to do a better job. So what I'm gonna do is follow the exact same model as what I did for the carving stone blocks video, and I'm gonna give my 3 levels of what I think basic foam wood grain carving should look like. Again, same disclaimer as I gave on that video, I am not the world's best foam carver, but this one I feel a little bit more comfortable with than with the block texture. So let's see what we get and dive into level 1. Level 1 is definitely going to be the most simple one, and we're going to talk about our tool list first. It is very simple. 2 things. 1, we're going to need a wire brush, and the second thing is we're going to need a pencil. What's interesting is we're actually not going to be using the pencil to do any stencil work for this stage. We're just going to be doing all of our wood grain with the wire brush. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to start by getting our piece that we need to wood texture, and we are just going to gently drag the wire brush against the grain to start carving in our wood texture. Now, if you notice, it looks pretty good already, and it's a lot closer to scale as to what a miniature would be. And another thing that's important to mention is I always start easy with this, but the harder you go, the more defined your wood texture will be. So I go nice and easy to start, and then I end up with this. Now we're gonna pull out our pencil and we're gonna kill off these really sharp lines. These sharp lines look very modern, so if you're going for a more modern build, maybe you wanna even leave those in place, but for me, I do a lot of medieval fantasy, so I want it to look hand-hewn. So I just take the edge of the pencil and I run it along the edges. You don't have to be super careful with that, but now what we have is a more rough-hewn piece. Now, if you compare that to the basic pencil technique that a lot of beginners do, you'll notice it did not take me hardly any time at all. In fact, I might even argue that it's faster than doing this way, but the results are just so much more realistic, and it looks so much more like realistic wood grain. And that's why I'm saying a very quick step just into level 1, and automatically you have a much, much higher quality looking result. That's the simple one. Let's move on to level 2. Now for level 2, we have a slightly larger materials list. We're gonna have our brass wire brush. We're going to have our pencil, but then we're gonna also now add an X-Acto knife. So to start this off, we're gonna pull out our X-Acto knife, and instead of just using the pencil to rub the edges off, what we're gonna do is shave the edges to make them get a little bit more of a hand-hewn look. Now sometimes I'm taking a big wide cut here, and I actually pull off sometimes where you get some of those, and then sometimes I'm just taking off a little bit of the edge. But so if you see, that line versus this super, super straight one definitely looks a little better. And now I'm gonna do that same thing over here. And now we have that. Now we're gonna pull out our pencil and we're gonna run all those edges. Now we've got something that's a little bit more intricate, not that much more work. Now we're gonna take our pencil and we're not gonna go straight to our wire brush like we did on level 1. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take and kind of mimic what we do with this super basic idea, but my favorite way to do this is to just take and make super quick, fast score marks like this. and as much of the piece as I can hit, I try to get big long lines. If they intersect, that's fine. But instead of drawing, I'm just making these quick strikes. And to me, that just looks a lot closer to a realistic wood grain. It's also really unpredictable. Now we're going to pull out our brass wire brush and then run that whole thing. And now we have our wood grain in there. Go again for more definition. What we can do is, if we really want to, we can go back in with our pencil and get some of those marks and exaggerate them in the exact same way. And now, if we take this and we compare it to level 1, it looks a little bit tidier. And if you notice, now we've got more defined wood grain, and we've just got a lot more visual diversity to look like an old piece of hewn wood. Level 2 definitely takes a little bit more work than level 1, but I think the results definitely stand out. Time to move on to the big boy, level 3. So if you notice, our materials list has grown again. So now, not only do we have our brass wire brush, not only do we have our pencil, not only do we have our X-Acto, but now we have broken out the plastic wire brush. Diversity in textures is what's going to get us the most realistic wood look. We're going to be using multiple brushes to start scribing in our wood grain. We're gonna start this one off a little different. For me, the way that I like to start these off is I like to pencil in the knots first. So level 3 exclusive is I start penciling in knots. The way that I do this is pretty simple, is I just find places that could fit for a knot, and I just kind of push a circle down in. If you want to, you can make a circle and then just progressively keep pushing that down to kind of imply rings inside it. But then you have those marks first. Now we're gonna go in and do our shaving marks with our X-Acto knife. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do our lines with our pencil, our strikes. And what I'm trying to do is avoid hitting the knots if I can. If you hit them, it's not that big of a deal for this kind of work. If I can avoid it, I do. And then what we're gonna do is move on to our plastic wire brush. Now, actually, I'll talk about this for a second. The plastic wire brush is softer and doesn't dig into the foam as much as the brass wire brush does. So I'm gonna get my full texture out of this. That's gonna just emphasize those pencil marks a little more without giving myself the chance of ripping the foam. And if you look, now that's a more, it's like a super version of the pencil scratch marks. Then now I'm gonna take and come in with my metal wire brush, and in certain places, I'm gonna accentuate the wood grain. Now the goal here is now we're not gonna be doing the full wood grain with the brass wire brush over the whole thing. We're just going to be making little sections more exaggerated. You get some of these little tears. That is going to be our level 3. Let's take that back and look at it compared to the others. You've got your level 1, pretty basic. Level 2, a little more intricate. And then finally, you've got your level 3, which really now starts to look very wood grain-like. The next step is getting these all painted up, and then I can show you what they look like all together. I threw a couple coats of brown paint onto these, and that is where I'm gonna call this done for now, but I'm gonna add a couple of disclaimers to the end of this video because that's, I guess, just what I do. So the first one is going to be a repeat of what I said at the beginning of the video. I do not consider myself a master foam carver. There are people who are way better than me at this stuff. If you are not a member of the Foam Modeling Crafters group, I suggest that you join because there are some people that do just some wild things with foam. But this, for me, is where I am. And actually, I really was thinking about this as I was doing this whole video. This would actually be a fun series for me to do, maybe even a couple of years from now again, so that I can see how I have grown as a crafter what is my level 3 in 2 years compared to what my level 3 is right now. The second disclaimer that I'm gonna add is I only threw a couple of coats of different browns on this. That is not the best way to paint wood. And the root of this second disclaimer is that there is so much that you can accomplish with paint that I didn't do. I think almost all wood texture needs some grays in it, and it needs some lighter, like khaki kind of colors in it. I didn't do any of that because I wanted to keep it as an apples to apples comparison, something that when you're looking at this very, very basic one, you can compare it to all the others and see exactly what that looks like. But with that said, these are my 3 levels. I think they all look great and they increasingly get better and better each time. And while all of them are just very, very slightly harder to do than the basic just draw wood grain with a pencil, I really think that the difference makes it worth it, and I hope it's something that you can use in your builds. But that's it for this week's video. If you enjoyed it, definitely do all of the YouTube stuff. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Like this video. Comment down below of your favorite technique that you use to do wood grain on foam. The #1 way that you can help out a small YouTube channel is to share their videos with a friend that you think would enjoy it. So if you have a friend that would really get something out of this video, if you shared it with him, I honestly can't say thank you enough for all of you that do that. So that's it for this week's video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next week, I'll be seeing you.